Senator Rand Paul said Tuesday the government should not force parents to vaccinate their children. This is his quote. I believe that the benefits of vaccines greatly outweigh the risk, but I still do not favor giving up on liberty for a false sense of security, Paul said during a Senate hearing focused on the rise in preventable disease outbreaks. Paul, a medical doctor, said while he and his kids have been vaccinated, the government should rely on persuasion rather than force to increase vaccine rates. I think it's important to remember that force is not consistent with the American story, the senator said. Every state requires children to have certain vaccinations like the measles, mumps, and rubella vaccines before entering public school. Paul appeared to disagree with these requirements, saying he's not a fan of government coercion. His comments drew a rebuke from Senator Bill Casey, Republican of Louisiana, who is also a physician. Let me give some color to what Senator Paul said, Cassidy said during the hearing, noting that he has met people who ended up with terrible diseases because they weren't vaccinated. The requirement is just that you cannot enter school unless you're vaccinated. Now, if you're such a believer in liberty that you not wish to be vaccinated, then there should be a consequence. And it is that you cannot infect other people. Cassidy noted that some children aren't able to receive vaccinations because they have weakened immune systems or are receiving cancer treatment, but they can be protected if enough people around them are vaccinated because they would make it harder for disease to be spread. So now, if you believe in liberty, that's fine. Cassidy said, don't get immunized, but I don't think you need to necessarily expose others to disease. Wow, that's one up for Cassidy. He went against a member of his own party. And you can understand when I talk about any political figure, I always try to give them credit when it's due and go after them when it's something that I disagree with them on. So, for example, I always give Paul credit for being consistently a non-interventionist. No matter who's in office, he will oppose a war, and I think that is something that really should put him leagues above a lot of the other Republicans. But on social issues, there's just this overarching trend to be really unreasonable and illogical. So you have a person who says we need persuasion as opposed to the government forcing people to vaccinate their children. Well, shouldn't the persuasion for any moral, decent person be to not infect others, the public health of their fellow American, that the people that they're supposed to live with and contribute to the lives of by being fellow productive members of society? I mean, I read this response from him, right? And it reminds me of why I hate when people talk about ideologies, libertarian, socialist, all that, because the root belief of conservatism is limited government. But I think I think most people can agree that you still would need it in certain places, which is why Social Security is overwhelmingly popular. The bottom line is that when you start trying to latch your ideology to just say, under all and every circumstances, we must oppose the involvement of government unless it's increasingly popular and I can't, override it because of how many people like it, you're going to get little stupid responses like that. That was a dumb comment on his part, that we should not be able to vaccinate or otherwise have children not show up to schools and be able to infect people because they didn't go to a doctor. And it's almost, I talked about the Twilight Zone, right? But really, no one's going to rebuke him on this in mass. They're upset about this border wall thing. I have news for you. Whether you like them or not, the illegal immigrants, for the most part, are not attending every single school. And if they are, they're certainly not carrying around measles and other diseases that, if Rand got his way, would be spread to a bunch of people who did nothing to deserve being infected. But do you see how his ideology tells him, forget the common sense of let's not risk the health of those around us, by ensuring that everyone has their vaccinations. No, let's vilify the government to appease our ridiculous base that thinks the same government that, under most circumstances they have no problem with in their day-to-day life, is some kind of demonic villain that's trying to rig the world and purge us from anything of any decency, as far as our individual liberty. I mean, I'm staring at this response, just his comment. Let's go back to it. You have him answering to this, and it's talking about his beliefs and the benefits of vaccines greatly outweigh the risk. So he admits out of his own mouth that there are more benefits to getting vaccinated than not. But then he still goes to, I am opposed to the government making it a requirement to have one of those before going to school. Do you not see why ideologies are toxic? Because they cause people to abandon common sense for the sake of just going by whatever their bias is. So, for example, most people would say, again, if they were just asked openly, do you believe that people would be more safe if they were treated for diseases that could spread than not? Most people would say yes, absolutely. But when you start talking about the use of the government, and it's time for Uncle Sam to tie up little Jimmy and stick a needle in him so he can go to school and not spread his disease. Oh, here comes World War III. Here comes the supposed destruction of liberty. Jesus Christ. So this just underscores my problem with him, the problem that I've consistently had with him the entire time he has been in the Senate. Really good on foreign policy, really a hit or miss kind of person on social issues. I think the only social issue that he is correct on, just 100%, is getting out of the war on drugs. But everything else is basically a dumpster fire. You're against gay marriage. You talk about being opposed to government-run healthcare while you go to Canada and get surgery and use their government-run healthcare to get it for free. You really can't make this stuff up. And that's my point, that he is not stupid. He knows when he says that it's a ridiculous comment, which is why he has to say, I believe the benefits of being vaccinated outweigh the cost. Because of course they do. And he is a very smart person who, because they're in such a really ridiculous position of having to appeal to a group of voters who are going to, in some instances, dismiss the government at all turns, he's just screwed. He can't win. He has to pretend to be unreasonable at the same time as he's being reasonable. And what I find so comedic is that this kind of thing, right, where you're going around literally advocating for people to be able to put their children in a school without the proper procedures to make it to where they can't spread disease, it's not going to attract the same amount of attention that him deciding to not support the national emergency declaration would, because it's not in the news every day. Vaccinations, they're not being covered with the same level of obsession and recurrence that immigration is, and that's kind of why I really do hate the style of the media, and I've mentioned it repeatedly, where they get one story, they blow it up, and then everything else gets completely shoved to the part. I mean, we have a senator saying, I support parents being able to, because they feel like government is so evil, not get their children vaccinated and then infect every single child that's around them who hasn't been vaccinated either. It's no one is going to talk about this, but also this comment is so ridiculous. It gets a rebuke from a senator in his own party. And this is not the stuff that's making the headlines. None of his detractors or supporters are even going to know about this. So, like I said before, I'm not here to advocate for the government or anything of that, but just common sense. And he has it. But because he's an ambitious politician, wants to stay in office for as long as possible, he's going to try to keep appeasing that group of voters that has convinced themselves the government is Lucifer in the flesh, even when it's doing something that is just very basic, like providing healthcare so that people don't infect each other all over the place.